Hey everyone, it's John Reed here from Learn to Stargaze and author of the 50 Things to See with a Telescope series. In this video, I'm sort of jumping ahead a bit to a topic I'd like to cover later this year, and that's basic deep sky astrophotography. But for me to get started, I need some new gear. So in this video, we're going to unbox and assemble a SkyWatcher EQ6-R Pro mount. This is Learn to Stargaze. Now, there are several absolutely amazing astrophotography channels on YouTube, particularly Astro Backyard, Astro Biscuit, and Dylan O'Donnell's incredibly entertaining Star Stuff. Now, I want to make sure that my content is original, so when I do finally post more astrophotography content, it will hopefully be in my usual non-technical style, which for astrophotography, I'm still trying to develop. But as I work on developing my own astrophotography skills and techniques, it's important for me to have the right tools for the job. Now up to this point, I've been doing all my astrophotography on a Celestron AVX mount using this small Explorer Scientific 102 refractor. And I've been getting images like this, and this, and this. However, I also have heavier scopes like this 8-inch Newtonian and the Celestron C8. Now these scopes and future telescopes on my wish list require beefier mounts if I'm going to use them effectively. Now, as I said, I'm going to take what I consider to be a very non-technical approach to astrophotography. And what I mean by this is that I'm going to take images in such a way that they won't require much post-processing to get the results that I'm looking for. I'm just going to use a color camera, a light pollution filter, and an ASI AR so that I can process the images on my cell phone and for the most part skip the computer altogether. And the reason I'm choosing this sort of simplified astrophotography method is simple. My goal as an astronomer is to share the night sky with people in real time and mostly in person. I'll be using just my phone or an iPad along with the ASI AR app. The ASI AR app uses an ASI AR computer, which is just a little Raspberry Pi attached to your telescope. And this will allow me to show students or the general public amazing color photos of nebula in minutes, with no post-processing required other than what I can do on my phone. So why the SkyWatcher EQ6 Pro mount? Well, quite simply, for the price range around $1,600 US or for me, 2,200 Canadian dollars, this is the best all-round imaging mount for the size range of telescopes that I plan to use. And now there are several videos already on YouTube that discuss the benefits of this particular mount at great length. So I'll just leave it at that. Well, let's open it up and see what we've got. Now, I ordered this mount from Ontario Telescope and it shipped via UPS and it came in less than 20 hours. Impressive. I'd just like to point out that I'm in no way sponsored by Celestron or Ontario Telescope. Anyway, carrying on. Whew, that is heavy. Okay. Damn. So this is the EQ6-R Pro. There's the EQ6 Pro without the R, and my understanding is that the only difference is that there's a belt in the R version where there is a cog or a sprocket or something in the other version, and that makes this mount, the R version, just a little bit smoother, apparently. I could be wrong. Okay, small boxes on each side of the tripod box seem to contain the counterweights, so there's one. Will this scratch the hardwood floor? Probably. So I'm at 45 degrees north latitude. I might as well set that now. So this is the neat feature here. It looks like you can adjust the length of the counterweight pole. It also includes a polar aligning scope inside the mount itself, and that's another thing my AVX didn't come with. In addition to being able to extend the arm for the counterweights, there's also an additional extension. So I'll just put this aside for a while. I don't think I'll need it with these telescopes. So it's calling these knobs hand wheels, but really these look like just the fine adjustments for polar aligning your mount. And they look like this, and there's 3 of them. And these just go in around the base of the mount here. Now it looks like the small one has already been installed, so it appears that this came with 4, and then this extra one is for more extreme latitudes. All right, so now for a very important test. Can I lift this? Okay, actually that's not too bad. If you're an astro imager, you don't want to have to set up and tear down the scope every night. You want to have an imaging rig ready to go when you need it. Okay, so now that we've got the mount fully assembled, it's time to add some gear. But before I do that, just an update on this channel. I started Learn to Stargaze about 5 months ago, so it's still pretty new. I currently have about 650 subscribers, but in order to join the YouTube Partner Program, which would really help this channel grow, I need to get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you enjoy my content, please help me out by hitting that subscribe button. And if you're new to astronomy, you can support me by purchasing one of my award-winning stargazing books, like 50 Things to See with a Telescope. This is the kids' version, the most popular one. Or the much-loved 50 Things to See on the Moon. All right, well, let's put some gear on this telescope and I'll walk you through a basic imaging setup. So the first thing I want to test is to see how difficult it is to get this mount out of the house. I'm also going to bring out the travel scope, and we're going to take the gear off the travel scope and move it on to the EQ6-R Pro. All right, so without the counterweights on the scope, that actually wasn't so bad. It's not that different from carrying around the Celestron AVX with a little bit of gear on it. Okay, now it's time to shift the imaging gear off the travel scope and onto the new mount. Now the telescope I'm going to be using is the Explore Scientific ED102CF, and that's an apochromatic refractor. So the camera we're going to use is an ASI 294 NC Pro, and I'm going to add this 0.8 focal reducer field flattener onto it right here. This is made by Altair, and that screws on just like that. And because we're in a city and it has a lot of light pollution, we're going to add this 2-inch L-enhanced light pollution filter. Now I know a lot of people these days are using the L-Extreme. The only reason I'm not using the L-Extreme is because it was sold out, probably due to COVID. And now the light pollution filter screws right in to the focal reducer, just like this. Okay. So the auto guider setup I'm using is just a Starfield 50mm guide telescope, and it is hooked up to an ASI 120 mini guide camera. All right, so now we're going to move over the ASI Air, and that allows us to control everything from a cell phone and skip the computer, and that covers guiding and stacking and things like that. Although I forgot the screw that connects it to the telescope, I'm gonna let the ASI ride on top right here. And since I forgot the little screw, I'm gonna have to use zip ties. And the ASI Air just connects using a basic Celestron finder scope adapter. All right, now we connect all the wires. Now, instead of connecting the ASI Air to the mount itself, I don't have that cord right now. So what I'm gonna do is use this cord right here, USB into the ASI Air, and then what looks like a phone cord into the bottom of the hand controller here. So this should clip right in. like this. It does. Perfect. Put that back, and then USB into the bottom of the ASI Air. Now this is one of the most annoying cords, so we'll have to keep an eye on that as we set it up and think about how we can thread that cord down safely. Now the last thing I'm going to add is a Rigel quick finder right here, and this helps with aligning the scope and just making sure that it's pointed at the right spot. Now I'm not going to put any dew heaters on this as the temperature is sub-zero and the telescope's not forming dew right now, and the power supply I'm using is just an Exterminator power tank. These are from Canadian Tire. There's probably an American equivalent as well. And because the mount and the ASI Air both use a cigarette lighter port, and this power supply only has one, I'm just gonna use a little splitter here that was about 10 bucks and plug them right in. All right, so now that all the gear is attached, it's time to balance the scope. I'm gonna start with this axis here, and I can see that this needs quite a bit of weight. All right, both weights are a little bit much. I'm gonna take one off. And remember, you can extend this moment arm here as well. All right, so it looks like with the arm fully extended and the weight at the end, we've achieved the right balance for this scope. Right now, we're just gonna balance the other axis. Well, the nighttime forecast for the considerable future is for clouds. So we're gonna take advantage of the fact that it's sunny right now, and I'm gonna put a solar filter on this telescope, and we're just gonna see if the mount slews and that it all works together like it should. Okay, so the ASI Air recommends a 3-star line, so we're gonna do that now. Again, I never read the manual, so bear with me on this one. And it really doesn't matter what we choose, I'm just gonna go through the process. So this is the first time the mount is moving for me. And what I'm gonna really do right now is just keep an eye on these cables to make sure we don't get caught up. And man, this mount is quiet. So again, we're making sure we've got the lens cap there on the finder scope because the sun is out and a solar filter on the telescope. All right, second star, Vega. Keeping an eye on those cables. Also keeping an eye that the scope doesn't hit the mount. That was a close call. All right, we've got a successful align. All right, now that we've done a 3-star line with the mount, it's time to log on to the ASI Air. So I've turned it on, it's beeped. I've connected my phone to the ASI Air's Wi-Fi network. Now the Wi-Fi range on the ASI Air is very short, sometimes as little as 6 to 7 feet. But it looks like, we're about 8 feet away and the phone has connected to the ASI Air. So now what I just wanna do is see if I can control the mount from here. All right, it looks like SkyWatcher SynScan is one of the mount options in the ASI Air. So let's click on that and see if we can connect. All right, it looks like we're connected. Let's sync data to the mount. Sync successful. All right, now let's see if we can control the mount from the app here. And there we go. I can see the mount is moving. Okay, so now we want to point it at the sun. Let's just slew the telescope manually. I'm just keeping an eye on that shadow. Minimize the shadow to get the sun. So now on the ASI Air, I'm going to turn this to focus mode. So again, just minimizing that shadow and then waiting for the sun to show up on the screen. So I've set 1/2-second exposures and I can see that we're getting some of the light from the sun here. So we may also be out of focus. So I'm gonna need to align the telescope and focus simultaneously. So it turns out I need an extra focal extender on the camera to achieve focus. So let me put that on right now. All right, we're making progress. I have the sun on the camera's live view here on the ASI Air. Now we just need to achieve focus and see if there are any sunspots. All right, so we've got the ASI Air in video mode, and here is a live video of the sun through the telescope here, and there's no sunspots. I've got it in focus and everything. So, but I guess the point is that the ASI Air works. We can control the mount with it. With minimal effort, we were able to get the mount set up, the telescope ready for imaging, and hypothetically, if the clouds don't roll in, we'll be able to test it tonight on the Orion Nebula and see how it does. All right, so here's first light at night for the new mount. We know from earlier in the day that everything was set up correctly. The first thing I want to do now is check the focus, and I'm going to do that using a batten-off mask here. So using the ASI Air, I pointed the telescope at Betelgeuse. So I've got Betelgeuse on the screen here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the batten-off mask, put it over the lens of the telescope, and we should be able to check the focus quite easily. With the batten-off mask in place, I can see that our focus is perfect right there. The three lines are just where they need to be. The second thing I want to do is take my flat frame, so let's do that now. The first thing I'm going to do is point the telescope straight up so I can balance my flat panel on top of the scope. Now, holding the flat panel on the end of the telescope, I'm going to take 15 flats. This is done in live mode, so I only get one picture at the end, one flat file. And I'm using 0.2 second exposures for this telescope, which gives it a value on the histogram of about 30,000. So I also took darks yesterday for the camera settings I need for tonight, and that took about 30 minutes. So for darks, you use the same temperature and exposure settings as you do for your light frames. And so I'm going to be taking 180 second light frames at -10, and so I've taken dark frames with those settings as well. I use live mode for that as well, so that I only have one file to worry about. Now, what better target to select for first light than M42, the Orion Nebula? So we're in the middle of our first 180 second exposure of M42, the Orion Nebula. So one thing I didn't do when I set the scope up is give it a good polar align. And I'm hoping that this telescope is very forgiving and that the guider can compensate for my terrible alignment of setting up the mount. And I can see from the guiding that I'm within 2 arc seconds already. So the ASI Air shows the guiding here, and it's not great, but I can tell, I can see Orion in the guide scope as well. And but so far that's not bad. So within 2 arc seconds, the stars won't be, hypothetically, they won't be too blobby. But in a few seconds, we'll see that first image come through. All right, so here's the countdown to the first image from this scope. 3, 2, 1. All right, there's the end of the first exposure. The SI Air is now going to combine that with the flats and biases and darks, and it will load. Here you'll see the loading bar, and in a second we'll have that first picture of M42 on the screen. Wow! Would you look at that? Here, we'll take a screenshot here. Impressive. A single exposure from downtown Halifax looks like this. That's fantastic. All right, so I'm gonna let this gather 15 or 20 more exposures, and we'll come back in an hour or so and check out our final image. And here's the final image. I couldn't be more impressed. This is 20 exposures of 3 minutes apiece, and it looks fantastic. And again, this is just straight off the phone without any processing besides sliding the histogram, just like this. I'm really impressed. Like I said, I didn't do a very good polar align. You really wouldn't know it. The stars are pinpoints. The auto guider working alongside the mount is compensating for my poor alignment. The scope is a pretty fast scope, and it's pretty forgiving, so that's helping me out as well. In any case, this was a relatively trouble-free setup, and I can't wait to tackle some more challenging targets. And while the skies are clear, I figured, what the heck, let's get one more target in tonight. So here's just a few exposures on the Rosette Nebula. Isn't it beautiful? This is fantastic. Well, I hope you enjoy this video on the EQ6-R Pro mount. If you enjoy this content, if you haven't already, please subscribe to Learn to Stargaze. And remember, the future is looking up.